Good evening, my dearest friends, holy brothers and sisters. B'Rishus, the Rav, Harav Rabbi YY Jacobson Shlita, and the entire beautiful community of KLR, Kehilas, or Kehilat, Lev Ra'anana. I can feel the heart of Ra'anana. So first of all, I want to thank Rabbi YY for the privilege and the invitation to be here this special evening with all of you, my dearest friends. I just arrived to the Holy Land yesterday morning, Wednesday morning, and yesterday I spent the day in Tel HaShomer, much of the day at Tel HaShomer, where there are around 180 patients, most of them soldiers wounded in Gaza or Jews wounded on Simchas Torah, October 7th. It's a different world. You go from room to room. You meet the people, the men and the women on the porches or in the hallways or in their rooms or in the public areas. And I don't know, surreal, heart-wrenching, overwhelming, really not adequate words. Today, Thursday, we went early in the morning down south and visited some of the kibbutzim and towns and communities struck on Simchas Torah on October 7th, the army bases, the Zikim beach area, and met a lot of the Jews there, a lot of the soldiers, a lot of the people, survivors. Also very, very powerful experience, powerful in many ways. Yesterday, as I was walking in Tel HaShomer, stopped at a person sitting there. I saw that he lost his right leg. His name is Ben. And we were just schmoozing. He seemed very cheerful, very upbeat. There was like what you call a simchas achayim. Like he was funny, he was charming, he was engaging. I came off the plane. I didn't sleep much on the plane. So I was exhausted and half verschlafen and verhackt. I was just thinking about my bed. That still didn't come. I'm still waiting. But this kid, this young man, in his physical condition, and he's there since Simchas Torah. He's there for almost a half a year, with rehab and surgery after surgery. So he's sharing a story with me. He was at the music festival, the Nova Music Festival near Kibbutz Re'im. And me and Rabbi YY went there today with a few other people. We spent quite some time over there. They put up now pictures of the 350 young men and women who were murdered and those taken into captivity. I met one of the mothers over there. She's writing a Sefer Torah for her son and some other relatives. So this Ben was there. And he was there with his bride, whom he got engaged to a week earlier. Her name is Gali, Ben and Gali. And why did they go? This was a birthday gift. It was his birthday, so she decided she wants to give her chatan, her groom, a gift. And they went there. And he shared with me how the night went and how much fun he had, and what he drank, what he didn't drink. He shared his experiences together with his kala Gali. Of course, at 6:30 in the morning, the terror began, a horrific attack began. And at some point, they ran into a reinforcement room. What is it called? Migunit. It was small. A policeman was telling survivors who were escaping the terrorists to come in. And they both went into the back. They were one of the first. It was a small migunit. And it became packed very, very soon. And they thought they were safe, of course. And then they saw people coming towards them, and there's panic. Everyone is hollering. So somebody in the front says, Chevre, al tidagu, zet Tzahal. It's the army. It wasn't the army, it was Hamas, yimach shemam. When they started to shoot inside, everybody realized that it was not the army. And Gali took her Chatan Ben and pushed him down, and they both went down. So they avoided the bullets. And then Ben told me, but then he saw that the Hamasnik threw in a rimon, a grenade. And at that moment, he was holding his kala, and it exploded. They lost consciousness. Hours later, he found himself in a hospital. His right leg was blown off. He was certain that his bride died. A little while later, as he's being led down the hallway, who does he see? His bride, Gali. Her right leg was also blown off. Not even a left and a right. I say, where's your Kala? She's right there. Right there in the next room. I see Gali is sitting there, also radiant, smile. Lebedik also lost her right leg. And Ben tells me, he says, we're getting married this summer. He's looking forward to the wedding. So I say to him, אתה צריך להסביר לי משהו. אתה משוגע? למה אתה שמח כל כך? You have to explain this to me. Maybe you can come to America. A lot of anxiety there. A lot of anxiety. Israel is not the only country with anxiety. Maybe you could give me the tip. I can go back and tell people. And he looked at me like I was crazy. He says, what do you want? What do you want? I should live in the past? What could have been, what would have been, what should have been? I live in the future. I'm alive. My bride is alive. We can begin a life together. We actually understand each other very, very well now. We have the same issues. It wasn't verbatim what he said, but this was the concept of what he said. And yesh raglayim l'davar, very good. Yesh regel l'davar, yeah. And I met his kala, and talking to him. So they're getting married, they're looking forward to the chasana, they're looking forward to the wedding. They were supposed to get married already, but he said, we have all these surgeries, so now is not the right time. In the summer, in a few months, we're going to get married. As I was talking to him, something came into my mind. And I think it captures something very powerful about the Jewish people and about Eretz Yisrael, about Israel and about the Jewish people. And I think about each and every one of us, it's relatable. Parshas Tzav, this week's Parsha, there's two very interesting mitzvahs. We usually don't take note of it, because these are the mitzvahs, that they don't seem that relevant today. We say them in the morning, at least in many communities, it's said in the morning before davening. It's called the mitzvah of Trumat HaDeshen and Hotza'at HaDeshen. Right in the beginning of Parshat Tzav. What's the mitzvah? Every morning at dawn break, before anything else, what was the first thing done in the Beis HaMikdash? The Kohen, the priest, would go up to the altar with a silver shovel, fill up a shovel with ashes from the middle, from the Mizbeach, and that's it. Take it down, and v'samay eitzel ha-mizbeach. He would place the ashes right near the altar. Every single morning, if there was a lot of ashes in the mizbeach, it wasn't very effective. It wasn't very sufficient. There was a second mitzvah called Hotza'as HaDeshen, and that is every few days, depends on the situation, another kohen would go and empty out the whole mizbeach from ashes, and this was taken out v'hoitzi as hadeshen el mechutz lamachen el makom tahar. This was taken out outside of the camp, outside of Jerusalem. There was a place where they had poured all the ashes. So the commentators say, what's the point of both mitzvahs? Every morning you're taking one shovel of ashes and putting it near the mizbeach, and every few days you anyway got to clean up, and you're taking all the ashes, many shovels, and if it's Yom Tov time or a time when there's a lot of guests and there's a lot of ashes, a lot of offerings, it wasn't one shovel, it may have not been 10 shovels, it may have been 20 or 30 shovels. There was a tapuach, it was a big apple of ashes, tafuach, it was inflated. So what's the point of both mitzvahs? And also, why is it one shovel they put right near the altar? And everything else, they had to expel it, mechutz lamachna. So there's a beautiful discourse from the Baal HaTanya, from the Alter Rebbe. There's a beautiful maimer from Rabbi Shneur Zalman, of the author of the Tanya, the Shulchan Aruch Harav. He says something very powerful. And when I was speaking to Ben, I don't know, just it was like a living embodiment of this concept. It says in Svarim, Hadeshen, the ashes, is the same gematria like Satan, 359. Satan. Satan literally means you have the Satan. It also literally means mastin. It's obstacles, barriers. Ashes represents destruction. On Tisha B'Av, before Tisha B'Av, we dip the egg in ashes. The Chatan by the chuppah, many put ashes on the head to remember him. Eshkachich Yerushalayim Tishkach Yemini. It's what's left after the blaze. Some of you have went to the death camps in Eastern Europe, and if you go to Majdanek, you could still see the ashes. I was thinking, we go 70, 80 years later to Poland, and today I was in the Nova Festival, it's literally fresh wounds. Zikim beach, they still didn't touch anything. So everything is mamish as is. Deshen, ashes, represents post-destruction. Something was burnt, what didn't go up in the flames remains as a very blatant and dramatic reminder of what was, but isn't. And that's why ashes are represented. They represent a form of sadness or grief, I should say. Avelis, mourning. The Mishnah says during fast days, they would put Noisten Ephraim Mikla, they would put ashes, people would put ashes on their heads. And that's what it is. Even the color of ashes, there's a certain gloomy, grayish, dark color to it that represents the antithesis of joy. Everyone's life has ashes. Everyone's life has a Satan. Show me the person who doesn't struggle, and I'll show you a person who's not alive. Life is about confronting something. I don't want to sound pessimistic, but the truth is, there was an American author, what was his name? Scott Peck. You remember that book, Road Less Traveled By? He starts off his book, life is difficult. Once you know that, it can be fun. I like that line. Life is difficult. Once you know it, you don't have to kvetch. Just figure it out and then you can have fun. Now have a good time. But life is difficult. We all have the deshen. We all have those elements in our life where something destroyed something. Maybe a dream. Maybe a loved one. We just heard before. Maybe something very emotional that was lost. Some of us have lost our youth very early on. Everyone has something that was destroyed. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. Sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's unconscious. And we're left with the ashes. What do we do with the ashes? The Baal HaTanya says there's two types of ashes. Ashes you must have, but there are two types of ashes. There's Trumas Hadeshen and Eitzahas Hadeshen. There's the ashes that you tenderly lift up every morning with a silver shovel, v'samo eitzel hamizbeach. You place it near the altar. There's another ash, other group of ashes. Get it out. What's the difference? It says there are ashes that give us perspective. They teach us that we're human, we're vulnerable. They turn us into authentic people. They allow us to embrace each other, to be here with each other. They give us the gift of empathy. They allow us to remain simple, honest, open-hearted. These are the ashes that teach me why I came to the world. They teach me where my work is. Every one of us. Every one of you is in a marriage or in a relationship or in a life, whether you're single or married, where you experience triggers. What triggers you doesn't trigger me. What triggers me doesn't trigger you. What triggers you doesn't trigger your spouse so much. What triggers your spouse may not trigger you. What triggers you is that your wife got triggered by what you think she shouldn't get triggered by. I always say the right thing. Don't worry, I'm not going to say it the other way around because you don't get upset, I know. We all deal with stuff. It was just a joke. Relax in the back. Is he triggered? So we all have that. I could look at triggers as very depressing, or I could say, oh, now I know what I got to work on. If it's triggering me, it's because I have to work on it. It's an invitation to deal with an unresolved wound. Lucky are the people who can identify their inner pain and shame and not see it as an invitation for depression and anxiety, but as an invitation for discovery and renewal. But another form of ashes, the ashes that tell me my life is hopeless, I'm a curse, everything is a curse, life is depressing, it closes me up, it makes me angry, resentful. Those are the ashes, he says, you have to realize, I gotta go mechutz lamachana. Those voices will derail me from my mission. It's also part of my mission. The fact that I have those voices is also part of who I am. It's also a message. But if I allow those voices to take over, suddenly I'm going to find myself expelled from the joy of life. So yes, by every chuppah we put ashes. Rabbi Akiva sees his colleagues crying and he's laughing. And when they ask him, why are you laughing? As a good Jew, he says, why are you crying? Why doesn't he just tell them why he's laughing? The answer is, he was explaining to them why he could laugh, because they're crying. If they wouldn't be crying, he wouldn't be able to laugh. If they wouldn't be crying, it means they're detached from the narrative of history. They're detached from the pain of history. Because they're crying, they're in touch with the pain. Now he can also laugh. The pain actually is what allows the laughter to happen. It means that we're not disconnected. Going around the kibbutzim today, seeing the people on the ground, at some point I told Rabbi YY, forgive me, I don't know so much about politics, but I said, there seems to be a real gulf between a lot of people on top in the government of Israel and Amcha. When you speak to the soldiers, you speak to the people, there is such a sense of camaraderie and unity and dedication, unwavering commitment, like brothers and sisters. It was incredible by everyone. You have religious people, you have secular people, you have what seems to be very secular people and very religious people. And then at some point, I don't know where it gets lost, where that innocence gets lost. But it was really powerful to be able to see the empathy, the love that exists. The Chidushei Harim writes, it says in Gemara Maseches Shabbos, the Talmud tells a story that there was a non-Jew who came to Shammai and he said, teach me the whole Torah while I'm standing on one leg. So he threw him out. Comes to Hillel, and Hillel says, what you dislike to be done to you, don't do it to anybody else. That's the whole Torah. Everything else is commentary. So the Chidushei Harim says, why didn't he just tell him simpler? Why did he have to create a new Aramaic phrase? First of all, you have a biblical phrase, straight from Hashem. Second of all, it's 3 words instead of 6 words. Third of all, it's Hebrew instead of Aramaic. Hillel lived in Eretz Yisrael. So why does he have to invent a new phrase, what Torah is? Madalach Sani, what you dislike to be done to you, which became the golden rule, and you know who they attribute it to? Another Jew. But Hillel lived 100 years before him, so... It reminds me, just a cute joke, I'll tell you. My brother told me he met a group of cardinals. A group of cardinals, real serious cardinals. They wanted to know about Judaism, and they spoke for a few hours, and it became very intimate and like varim, warm. Not like a tish, but almost like a tish. And they felt very open, and they asked him to sing songs, and he sang songs. So at some point they felt, I guess, some trust and connection. So they turned to him and they said, Rabbi, tell us now honestly, who's Messiah? And he knew there's no way he can answer this question, and come out unscathed, because what is he going to say? And they were like really warm and open, but Atkan, Akafa Aleph and Akafa Zayah. So it's like, Rabbi, who's the Messiah? So he thinks for a moment, he says, one Jew or another. And that was it. It was perfect. They loved it. They were why did I get into this? Hillel, yeah. Very good. Just say v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. No, what you dislike to be done to you, don't do it to anybody else. The Rebbe says something very powerful. He says this person wasn't Jewish at the time. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, he wouldn't understand. Love another Jew, another person like you love yourself? Excuse me. I understand if you're my child, fine. And even then, if he's a teenager, I'm not sure. But a joke. Love him more, love him more, love him more. Yes. I could understand what you don't like to be done to you, don't do it to anybody else. That's the golden rule, it's the basics of civilization. That's already a different level. He couldn't explain it to him. So he had to come up with a new phrase. Today we felt that v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, it's not something explicable. It's not family. It's not biology. We're brothers in the same family. You're my child. Then I can understand it. It's something transcendent, divine, that literally lives in the heart of the Jewish people. And to remain anchored in that truth could be a challenge, but it's really the most natural, organic thing for a Jew. So you see that. We have Deshen. The Jewish people continue to experience grief, the ashes of destruction. Trumas Hadeshen is a mitzvah. You don't ignore the ashes. Every morning you take a shovel and with tenderness you lift up the ashes. Veherimet Hadeshen. You lift them up. Because when you lift them up and embrace it, it can embrace you and lift you up. It gives you direction, it gives you purpose, it keeps you grounded, and it keeps you vulnerable. And when we lose our vulnerability, we substitute it with a counterfeit ego. And once we substitute vulnerability with a counterfeit ego, we're not human anymore. We lose touch. That's the first type of ashes. But if the ashes are telling me that my life is evil, my marriage is cursed, I have the worst children, not only in Ra'anana, but in the state of Israel and in the whole Africa, Asia, Europe, and even America, and South Africa, and the United Kingdom. And they're not grateful, and whatever it is, whatever you're dealing with, or you think you're dealing with, or you're dealing with, if the conclusion is everything is miserable, and now let's move on, let's eat, it's usually let's eat, or let's drink, that's usually the next one, the next thing. Then he says, this doesn't have a place in the Machana of Klal Yisrael. Why? Not because we're in denial. Because we understand that ultimately, even Hadeshen, even the Satan, ultimately is here to be uplifted and to be transformed. Even if we don't always know how and why. So my dearest brothers and sisters, I want to bless all of us and all of Klal Yisrael, all of Am Yisrael, and all of our soldiers and all of their families, and that includes many of you here, and of course all those in captivity and all of their families, and all the wounded and all their families, and every one of us in our own hearts, that we should always be able to distinguish between Trumas Hadeshen and Eitzas Hadeshen. In our own life, we should always be able to experience the power of our soul, the power of triumph, the power of resilience, the power not to ignore our pain, but to hold on to the Deshen, to embrace it, and to realize that this is our mission. Why? We don't always know why. We don't always know why. But we do know that when we hold on to each other, and we could fulfill this mitzvah of Trumas Hadeshen, we put it near the Mizbeach. It reminds us who we are and what we want to do and what we need to avoid. Then, in these ashes, there are embers. There are embers. There's an etzem luz. There's the luz bone that's indestructible. And as the phoenix, right, the symbol of the phoenix, Rashi says, comes out of the ashes, once in 1,000 years comes back to life, will experience not only the tears of the sages, but also the laughter of Rabbi Akiva. B'karev b'yameinu, amen. The Ron just said, he says, you see, Ben in Tel HaShomer taught you Kol HaTorah Kula al Regel Achat. Good, the Ron. Gewaldig. And you just reminded me what Reb Simcha Binim of Pshischa once said. The Heilige Reb Simcha Binim of Pshischa was one of the great masters of Hasidism. He said he came to Hillel and said, teach me the whole Torah al Regel Achat. Which Regel? Simchas Torah. Because all the holidays have a reason in Chumash. There's Pesach, there's Shavuos, there's Sukkot. The Torah gives a reason. There's one holiday without a reason. Bayoim Hashmini Atzeret Tia Lachem. Shmini Atzeret and the Chutz La'aretz also Simchas Torah, and here it's together in Eretz Yisrael. There's no reason. So this non-Jew, he wasn't such a, he was ganz, he was more educated than many Jews. He says, teach me the whole Torah al regel achas, this one Yom Tov, this one day, what's the reason for it? So Hillel said, Mada Allah Chsani L'chavrach Lo Yisavet. The whole essence of Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah is Avos Yisrael. Avos Yisrael. Gewaldig. Look what you're triggering here. These are good triggers.